being recorded.
So a very warm welcome to everybody here for our July seminar that is going to be run by our wonderful member, Mandy Sinclair, and it's all about the power of the pause. So over to you, Mandy.
Thank you, Tracy. And I am just going to share my screen now to make sure that we can do this. So can everybody see that? Can I see a thumbs up or a smile or a nod or something? Fantastic.
Yep.
So I'm going to share with you this talk that I do now on the power of the pause. And it's kind of in two halves. And just having had that conversation and knowing what it's like to run your own business, as wonderful as it is, it certainly has its challenges at times. And I think hopefully you're going to find this useful. So the two halves is the first one is kind of taking you through all the benefits of taking breaks, because it is so easy to fall out of the habit of doing it, and also to persuade yourself that you're way too busy to take a break, and actually it can help you be far more effective. And the other half of it is I'm going to take you through a reflection exercise, because that is something else that we very rarely give ourselves time to do when we're on our busyness of life kind of wheel that we have. So that's how I'm going to talk to you today. First thing is, and I know that for some of you this is really difficult, and for Tracy and Hayley, I know that you are frantically planning what's coming next, but if you can, gift yourself this hour. So turn off your notifications. Jenny, I know this is going to be really hard, but just try and give yourself this hour for you, because it's so difficult to really focus on what's going on when you've got email notifications pinging up, you've got your phone buzzing next to you, and you've got lots of other things. And I know I've certainly been guilty many times of half listening to things, but I think especially given the topic of this talk, if you can do this, it really will help you take the maximum learnings from it. So I bet some of you recognise this. I know I certainly do at times, when you feel like you're just on a hamster wheel, and if you don't keep running at the pace you're running at, you're going to fall, and you're going to fail, and you're going to fall flat on your face. And I've certainly done that a few times as well. Often, you know, you can get to the end of the day and realise that the whole day's gone in a blur of emails, meetings, calls. You're bouncing from thing to thing. And Jen, I can definitely feel this for you. And you haven't got a moment to stop and think. And the other thing that tends to happen is you find yourself talking really, really fast. You're focusing on what you're going to say next. And if you're in interactions with other people and you're really busy, you're actually spending all of your time thinking about what you're going to say next, because you've got so much in your head, rather than really listening to others and thinking about, and you're also thinking about everything else you've got to do today. And I've been, and certainly as I've been doing some things in person recently, I've seen, and I think some of it is to do with us getting used to being back together, people talking over each other, talking really fast, and zero silence in the room. And if you've never got silence, I can guarantee people aren't really listening. Because if you're really listening, there will be a pause before the next person speaks. But when people are speaking over and over and over each other like that, I can guarantee they may be listening to the first few words that someone says, and immediately they're focusing on what they need to do to respond or react to it. And the other thing that we tend to do when we're running on this hamster wheel is we keep saying yes to things without thinking about what that means we've got to say no to. And that's a really important thing. And all that means is that you're just going to get busier and busier and busier. So actually you're going to have to run faster and faster and faster, because you just keep saying yes, because that's kind of easier in the moment often than it is to take the time to say no. But then you end up at the end of the day with a whole heap more things on your plate without having taken anything off. If you can build in a pause, one of the benefits that you get of that is that it allows you to stop reacting and start responding. It takes us out of the reactive part of our brain, the amygdala-driven part of our brain, where we tend to, you know, those moments we go, oh, why did I say that? Because you just reacted. You didn't have those moments to respond. And if you take the pause, it allows you to access that part of the brain. It gives you space to really listen to what others are saying. And there's a lot of people I know that just aren't comfortable with silence. But if you can get comfortable with silence and really listen to what someone has said, reflect on it, and then respond, you often have a much better quality conversation, and actually meetings will be quicker. You'll have less repeated conversations, and you're more likely to get the outcome that you want. Pauses can also let you review events with hindsight, establish facts and take learnings, and we'll be doing a bit of this in the second half of this. Again, if you're running really fast on the hamster wheel, we very rarely learn from what's happened, and before we know it, we're doing the same things over and over again. And for those of you that work with teams or work alongside clients or partnerships, if you're taking the pauses and slowing down that pace and really listening, it really facilitates better communication and inclusion of those around you. It really enables a coaching approach. Whereas if you're running at pace, you're much more likely to be in a tell approach. And that actually doesn't help the people around you take things off your plate or progress and develop as far as you want. And, you know, for me particularly, and the way that I work with people is it really gives you time to recharge your batteries. You know, we remember to plug our phones in every night, but we're not so good at plugging ourselves in and giving ourselves a chance to recharge. We run at a pace. So quite often, one of the things I hear from people is that I haven't got time, I'm way too busy. So I'd just like you to do an exercise for me now, for those of you that are on here. Can you pick something that's around you? It might be a pen, you might have a little ornament, it might be, I don't know, something else that's got something you can touch and feel, or if you're lucky enough to have a good view out of the window, have a look at something out of the window and just focus on it for me. And I want you to just give whatever you've chosen all of your attention. If it's something that you can pick up and touch, I want you to just feel it with your fingers. I want you to look at the different lights, the different colors, different textures. If you're looking at something outside the window, just notice how the light might be reflecting on it. If there's birds or other animals flying around or jumping around, have a look at those. If the leaves are moving slowly in the wind, just focus all of your attention on whatever you've chosen to look at. And if you get thoughts come in, just let them go and go back to focusing on what you've chosen on. Just let those thoughts go if they come in. Okay. How did you find that? Anyone want to share what happened?
Basically, mindfulness, isn't it? It's meditation. So
Mm-hmm.
you notice things that you wouldn't normally notice,
Okay.
that you need to take for granted that are there around us, and we don't do anything about them, think about them, and we're therefore not living in the present.
Thank you.
I'm lucky, Mandy, because I look out onto the Liver building.
Oh, fantastic.
And there's a cruise ship in, and I'm looking at all the birds. So it's always my inspiration. And whenever I feel really down or stressed, I look at that view.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Anyone else? Anyone notice anything that happened in their mind or in their brain? Anyone notice it go quieter?
Yeah, a bit. I felt that in my breathing slowed down.
Mm-hmm.
More relaxed.
Yeah. Okay. Now that was 1 minute. That's all that was. It's just 1 minute of time. And I know that no matter how busy we are, we can always find a minute. And even if it's while you go and make the cup of tea when the kettle's boiling, instead of doing 3 different things at once while the kettle's boiling, or checking the emails on your phone while you're doing that or whatever, if you actually just stand and look out of the window and do a mindful break whilst you're doing that, it's amazing the impact that it can have on you. It's like stopping, and as Andy said, it's like your breathing slows down, everything will slow down, and then you're ready to go again, as opposed to just running and running and running at full pace. You know, everybody needs to take those breaks. So I would challenge you to find a way to build in just 2 or 3 1-minute breaks in your day. That's all it takes. And the reason for focusing on something else, or the reason for picking something up, is it gives your mind something to focus on. There's another exercise you can do with your finger and thumb, which we've got time at the end I can take you through, but it's just about giving your mind something to focus on that's completely in the now. You're not worrying about what has happened. You're not worrying about what's going to happen. You're just in the now. And that just gives you that moment's breather before you get back on that hamster wheel, hopefully at a little slower pace, having reflected. Okay. So why do we need to take breaks? So for those of you that like a bit of science, a bit of facts to back things up, I've got some stuff for you here. So the first thing I want to introduce you to, and some of you may know this, something called the Goldilocks Curve. So what this is basically talking about is that we need a certain level of stress in order to perform at our best. And the curve here is showing the amount of stress that we have versus our level of performance. And there's an area in the middle here where we have the right amount of stress for us to perform at our best. And each one of us will have a curve that looks slightly different. So some people need, you know, their curve will be over slightly to the right of this, and some people's curve will be slightly to the left of this. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we start to notice when we have the right amount of stress for us. So I know I'm a nightmare. If someone gives me 6 weeks to do something, I'll do it in the 2 or 3 days before that it's due, because that works for me. You know, my curve is probably somewhere over here, slightly to the right, and that works. But what that means is that I can, if I'm not careful, start sliding down the right-hand side of this curve, where I come out of the good stress area and go into the distress area, where you can start hitting your fatigue, your exhaustion, health issues, and you get into burnout. So this is the burnout side of the equation. And sometimes, you know, we don't notice this because it happens gradually over time. And this is where, you know, there can be some real challenges that I'll talk about in a minute. But equally, we have this area over the left. And if we fall too far down the level of stress, we can actually have something, I know this sometimes gets called bore out. So if you're doing something that really doesn't interest you in anymore, it's not lighting up any of your buttons anymore, you're not getting any kind of reward from what you're doing in terms of motivational reward and mental reward, you actually slide down this side. And that's where you see your motivation really drop. You can get bored, you can feel really low, you know, your mood can be impacted, and it can start impacting lots of other areas of your life because you're just too far down that bore out side of the curve. And of course, the challenge is if we never take breaks, if we're running at 100 miles an hour on that hamster wheel the whole time, we don't tend to notice where we are on here. And so this is one of the things that I want you to bear in mind as we're going around down this, is to think about, where do you think you are on this curve at the moment? Are you starting to slide down the right-hand side? Certainly listening to that conversation at the beginning, you know, that if things go on for too long, sometimes just our resilience starts to drop, our energy starts to drop, and then we have less capability to deal with the stress, so we can start sliding down. Or are you really in need of a new challenge, new motivation? So last year and a half taken a really big toll on you, and maybe you're sliding down this side. Or maybe you're here and you just, you know, we need to recognize that and understand what it is that gives you that optimum level of stress. And if we never reflect, we'll never know. So just a quick bit on acute versus chronic stress. So when we're here, then we can experience moments or periods of acute stress. So for example, if you're going to go in and do a big pitch for a piece of work, or you're going to deliver a big program or something like that, you need that acute stress, because that acute stress prepares you for your best performance. You get increased adrenaline, your heart rate can go, you have increased short-term memory, your focus and attention, you're kind of primed to perform at your best. The challenge is, though, if we stay in that stress level and we don't give ourselves opportunities to relax and get back into this area here, we will start sliding down this curve. And when you get into chronic stress, you get increased cardio stress, we start storing glucose as fat, we have decreased immune system, it's why we get ill, decreased memory and capacity, and decreased focus and attention. And one of the most dangerous things is we become desensitized to stress. So we're less likely to notice that we are sliding down this right-hand side. So again, this is why it's really important, if we're over here on this side, that we take these regular breaks to get us back into the optimal performance. And we take time to reflect and notice where we are on this curve and any adjustments that we need to make. So one of the things I hear a lot is I'm too busy to take breaks, but actually there is loads and loads of science out there and experiments that have been done and research to show that regular breaks give you improved productivity. They make you quicker, not slower. They also enable you to access something in the brain called the default mode network, which is where you do your best creative problem solving. So, and if you want to just think about it and tell me now, or stick it in the chat, whatever you, I mean, we're a nice small group. So where do you do your best thinking? Where do you get your best ideas?
Walking the dog.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm out for a run.
Yeah.
Paddleboarding.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's fabulous.
Sitting in
Shower
the
works for
garden.
me. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah.
Looking in the garden.
Mm-hmm. Anything else?
Cooking.
Yeah. I've never once had a person tell me in front of my laptop at my desk. Ever. Right? And there's a reason for that, because when we're in front of the laptop, when we're in the desk, when we're doing our day job, we're focused on the doing. But when we're doing something completely different, like paddleboarding or gardening, or walking the dog, we're much more in kind of being mode. Our brain actually has time to process, think, reflect, and accesses a different way of being. So again, you know, if you don't take, the more good breaks that you can take, the more chance you have to come up with those ideas, to come up with that creative problem solving. And of course, the busier we get, that's when some of those activities you've been talking about are likely to get less space in our life, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. There was actually, interestingly, some research that came out the other week that I heard about, where in the US there were an experiment where people were having to learn to repeat a series of 5 numbers, and they were trying to learn and remember that. And there was 2 groups. One were given regular 10-second breaks, and one group weren't given any breaks. And the group that just had those 10-second breaks performed significantly better in the trial. And they measured what was going on in the brain in those 10-second breaks. And the brain actually repeated the same movements in the break that it did while they were doing the 5 sequence numbers. So it was like the brain was practicing and remembering. So again, if you're running at speed all through the day, you're not able to take as much in, you're not able to process the information. Whereas even little micro breaks allows your brain to kind of it's almost like Hayley was talking, it's almost like your brain does the labeling. It kind of does the, you know, the labeling, the remembering and the storing, and just helps you be much more effective as you go forward. So I found that really interesting. It can be something as short as 10 seconds can really help your performance and that. So, you know, Lisa, you were saying, you know, just you get inspiration looking out at the Liver building. So even when you're doing that and you taking that break away from your screen and looking out, that just gives your brain a chance to kind of order what's happening.
Mandy, what I find that I do my most inspiration, which is a really bad thing as well, is in
Mm-hmm.
the middle. I'll wake up in the middle of the night with a brainwave, and that's not good, is it?
Well, it depends what then happens. So if that then keeps you awake for hours, then that's
Yeah.
not great. So do you have a post-it note or a pad by your bed?
Yeah, I've heard that that's the way to do it, but I need to do that.
Yeah.
Definitely write it down.
Want to do it, and then you will.
Yeah. Okay.
But because what you're doing is you're giving yourself permission to forget. It's the way to say it. I'm not going to forget this. I've written it down. I can go back to sleep now.
Yeah. Brilliant.
So you're not going to let it go.
It works.
Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
Hi.
My
It does.
my brainwaves come when I'm driving and in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
I think.
And of course, driving, because you're unconsciously competent, you're not having to think too much about the driving. Obviously, you're aware of other road users, but your brain's able to relax and think. But no, it really does work, Lisa Johnson. It does. But the other thing is, as I may challenge you, is if you have more of these breaks during the day, your brain will get it out during the day, and then maybe you'll get better sleep. Worth a try. The other thing is of course, you know, we often spend a lot of time working in our business, and sometimes the time on our business can be a bit challenged. And having these breaks can enable us to take a step back and see that bigger strategic picture rather than being really too focused in on the detail. So that's another benefit of taking breaks. And, you know, like athletes, our brains need a rest. It's you know, it can't run at full pace the whole time. And, you know, if you think about athletes, even the highest level athletes, they have rest days because they know that helps them perform better. They don't go out and train really hard 7 days a week, 52 weeks of the year. They absolutely have rest times built in to allow themselves to recover. And there's for those of you that like kind of time management techniques, I don't know if any of you have come across the Pomodoro technique, which is, I think, Spanish for baby tomatoes, I think. But anyway, what you basically do is you work for 20 minutes. It's really great if you struggle with procrastination. So you literally take 20 minutes where you dive into a task. So if you've got, I don't know, a presentation to write or a proposal to put together or something like that, instead of thinking about the whole thing, think about doing a 20 minutes burst and then rewarding yourself with a 5-minute or a 10-minute break. So a couple of things, it'll help you get past procrastination, but it also then gives you that space that you kind of got the reward of the break at the end, and do something that makes you smile in that break, whatever it is. Even if it's watching silly cat or dog videos on Facebook, just give yourself a break away from it. So that can be something that's really great, and there's lots of proven research out there about that. So productivity is a big thing, but also so is stress levels. So some of you will have seen the stress bucket before, but we have lots and lots of things that are putting water into our bucket, and it's up to us a lot of the time to manage the holes at the bottom that take the stress out of the bucket. And when you're really, really busy, we often end up blocking our holes up because we no longer do the things that work for us, and then we get surprised when our stress bucket overflows. So even, you know, getting into the habit with your diary of giving yourself a really short break between meetings and calls and getting up, moving away, just allows you to have a moment of emptying the water level in your stress bucket, if you like, just allowing it to drop down a bit before you go into the next one. You know, we did that 1-minute exercise at the beginning of this. So just 1 minute before you pick the phone up and dial the next number or log into the next Zoom or Teams or whatever it is, just take that moment to quieten your brain, slow the breathing down, as Andy said, and just buy yourself a little, you know, couple of centimeters of space in the top of your stress bucket before the next meeting. And if you are struggling with something that's just happened, if you've just had a really stressful meeting or a challenging conversation, or you've had maybe a big disappointment or something, or you're worried about something, a bit like we just talked about, if you wake up in the middle of the night, if you have got to go into something else, take 1 minute. It's amazing what you can write down in 1 minute. Write down what it is that's really bothering you, and you give yourself permission to forget for now and come back later, Because if you just say to yourself, oh, I need to let that go, I should just move on, you're denying what's really going on in your mind. Whereas if you say, this is bothering me, I'm going to write it down and I'm coming back to it when I've done this meeting, you will find it much, much easier to come back and reflect on the facts later. And also the facts of the situation will look different in an hour or 2 hours time, because you're taking yourself out of react and into respond. So that's another way that you can just buy yourself a little bit of space in between, challenging interactions. Because I'm sure we've all been on the receiving end where we go into what we think is a perfectly kind of calm and it's going to be a nice meeting with someone, and they are clearly bothered from something that's just happened, and you've probably got half the person with you that you really want, and they're already primed on a kind of a 7 or an 8 on a stress level, and you just know that, and it's not a great interaction. So I'm sure it's certainly happened to me sometimes. I've been guilty of this, so this can really, really help. And then the other one, and you'd expect me to talk about this, is self-care, right? I say this to people a lot. You can't pour from an empty cup, put your own oxygen mask on first. So if you're responsible, for other people in your business, you're responsible obviously for how your business runs, the success of it. You can't keep doing that if you never focus on yourself, because at some point you're going to have an empty battery. So use these little micro breaks. Again, difference, if you put the kettle on, takes what, 2-3 minutes for a kettle to boil, depending how much water's in it. Get out and walk around the garden. Go stand outside the back door and watch the birds for just those 2 minutes. It will make a difference. If you can get out and do a mindful walk, whether it's walking the dog, Hayley, whether it's just getting out, for 20 minutes at lunchtime, and doing it mindfully. And by that, I mean, focus on what's around you. Don't walk and lose your brain totally on everything that's happened in the morning. It's fine to have reflection, but if you're really quite stressed, your stress bucket is full, it's far better to go and do a mindful walk, or even half and half. 10 minutes of mindful walking, get yourself really centered in the now, get yourself much calmer, give yourself space in your stress bucket, and then do 10 minutes of reflection. That's fine, but that's totally different than rushing out for a 20-minute walk and constantly thinking about what you got to do for the rest of the day. You'll get far more benefit if you can do it this way. This one sounds really obvious, but hydration and nutrition is really important. Our brains are 70% water, so it's actually the water that connects the different pathways in our brains. So if you're dehydrated, your brain literally can't work as well. So make sure you've permanently got the water in the drinks next to you, and don't allow that to be the thing that goes first, because it will make it much harder for you. And then, especially over the last 18 months, but even in normal life, I know when you're running your own business and you're really busy, connection with others goes, because everything's so focused, and just having those opportunities to have an informal, no agenda catch up, a virtual walks, i.e. you're walking, they're walking, you're on the phone, can be great. It's a great way to stay in touch with people hundreds of miles apart. Or meetups now we can, we need connection with human beings. We're hardwired for connection. So don't allow that to be the thing that goes. It's why the one-to-ones we do are so vital, because sometimes just sharing with someone who's in the same situation can be really powerful. So make sure you build in your own self-care as well. And then just a quick bit on the whole working from home versus living at work, which is the other phrase that's around at the moment. Those of us that run businesses, obviously some of us have worked from home for longer than the pandemic. Other of us maybe had a better mix before the pandemic and are now all at home. Some of us have got staff that are doing this as well, or are working with clients who are now working from home and are not used to it. And what I found is that without clear boundaries, people can fall into the trap of always feeling that they're on. I can't not check my emails. Whereas before they'd have left work and been much happier having a boundary. And now that, the laptop's out on the dining room table, they're in the kitchen, they're doing whatever, they tend to check. things that they wouldn't check. And when work starts impacting on our personal priorities, or if we're so busy with our own businesses that we can no longer do the things that are important to us, it impacts the intrinsic motivation for the work. And that's the feeling that you're doing important work or fulfilling their purpose. And it's interesting because obviously people work for money because we have to live. There is nearly always a commercial element to it. But when we feel fulfilled, or we feel that work is ticking other boxes for us, that's when we perform at our best. That's when we're at happiest. And that's when we tend to stay longer with companies, we have less absence, etc. So whereas it extrinsically motivated, it just becomes about salary and job security. So it's really important for people around us as well as ourselves that we have those boundaries between work and home, and that we know when we're at work and we know when we're not. And I know with businesses, running your business, particularly when you're striving to get it up and running, or like Jen is, when you're in a really kind of, you know, stormy place with it, as wonderful as it is, it's kind of a good problem to have. It's still a problem. If you never feel like you're off, that will start taking you down that right hand side of that Goldilocks curve. And that's when everything actually becomes much, much harder to do, and your health starts impacting. And sometimes, you know, we're very, very good at ignoring our bodies until they shout really, really loudly at us. So just think about this and think about whether you've got your boundaries. So I hope there I've covered a number of different reasons and given you some things to think about one, how you can build breaks in and how short those breaks need to be. Remember that experiment with the 10 seconds or the 1 minute thing that we did at the beginning? This isn't about, you know, taking the whole afternoon off and, you know, doing Netflix and chill on a regular basis. You know, it's about short, regular breaks, taking those moments, looking out the window, you know, and giving yourself permission to stop, even for 1 minute at a time. It really will make a difference and have lots and lots of impacts on everyone around you as well. So I want to talk to you now is about reflection and developing a reflective habit. So there's a quote here that I love, some of you may have heard me use, which is, we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. Because if we're on that hamster wheel the whole time and we're just running and running and running, we'll often find we keep repeating the same things over and over again, because you never step off and really reflect on what's happened and then choose to do something different. So I work with a 4-step process that I'm going to take you through now, and I'll talk to you about it and then we'll do a bit of an exercise. So the first thing is to build in time to reflect. And by reflect, I mean look back on something that's happened, whether it's your week, your day, or an interaction that you've just had, a meeting or a client visit or whatever it is that you've just had, or even a discussion at home, right? Building time to reflect and just replay what happened without judgment. That's the really important thing, that you get out any judgment language and you park it to one side. Then the trick is to get curious. Ask yourself questions about what happened and explore. Again, no judgment, no use of the word should or shouldn't, or any of that stuff. It's just about reflecting on what happened and asking yourself questions around it so that you can understand it better. And then look at what you can learn. So you reflect, you get curious, and then you understand what you can learn from what just happened. And we learn from what went well as what didn't go so well. And only then think about the action. Because when you're running on that hamster wheel, you often go, oh, this just happened, I'm going to do this. And that might be the right answer, but it really might not be the right answer. But if you take the time to really think about it, ask the questions, look at what the learnings really are, then you'll probably take a whole different quality level of action. So I want you now, please, to sit, and I'm going to give you a few minutes and have a reflect. So we're on, it's Thursday today, isn't it? We're on Thursday. So have a think about your week. If you've got something really on your mind, then just focus on that. If you've got something that you can't get off, but have a look now and think about your week. Run through, and we're all humans, we're all whole people. Most people really struggle to totally compartmentalize between work and home. So think about work and home, think about everything that's going on in your life, and just remind yourself of what's happened. And I know sometimes when you're on that hamster wheel, you kind of go, I have no idea what I did on Monday or Tuesday, but just try and jog your memory with a few things. Obviously, you're not going to remember everything. I'm just going to give you a few minutes. Make sure that you don't judge anything. Just remember it. And it probably will help you to write down a few bullet point notes or whatever medium you prefer to take your notes in. But just do some things now. Give you a few minutes of silence to just reflect upon your week and just remember. So no judgment. Just remember a few things that have happened that we'll then get curious about. See some people busy writing. Busy weeks. Okay. So now we're going to get curious. So what are you most proud of your week and what you've just reflected on? Have a think about what you're most proud of. And if your inner critics are telling you you've got nothing to be proud of, give me a call. Because you certainly will have. Okay, next question. When did you feel most alive? When were you most you?
This week,
Yeah, and what you've been reflecting on. What are you grateful for this week? Other than the score last night? And what are you celebrating? What wins have you had? Home or work? Okay. Now the question that I know most people's brains would have gone to first. What didn't go as well as you hoped this week? Again, that can be in any area. And then what's important to you about your week? That's something we don't always think about. You know, what are your priorities this week? What's the most important things to you about this week? We often spend too much time on the urgent and not the important. And then finally, for this one, and obviously, you know, there are thousands of different questions you can ask yourself. These are just some that I find get people to look at things a little bit differently, is what's the story you're telling yourself about the week? Because the way we talk to ourselves, the language that we use is really important. So are we telling ourselves it's an awful week and I just want to get to Friday? Or are we telling ourselves it's a week of opportunity and we're really excited about stuff? Are we somewhere in the middle? You know, what's the narrative that we are giving ourselves about our week? Because that will change how we feel. So hopefully that made you maybe look at a few things slightly differently in the week that you've had. There's a reason I go to those 4 kind of positive questions first before we go to the one not as well as we hoped, because our brains have a real negative bias. And as we move into the learning, I want to just point out that we can learn from both successes and failures. And we often tend to focus on the things that didn't go well, focus on all those things, sometimes beat ourselves up, kind of regret, kind of a lot of should language. And we rarely spend enough time both celebrating and reflecting on the things that go well. Because if something's gone really well, guarantee there'll be something in there, there'll be a learning in there that we now know that will help us in the future. So maybe we tried a new approach with a potential client. Maybe we you know, had a different way of responding to a lead. Maybe, you know, we did some training with the wonderful Andy and we used a tool that we now know works for us and helps us feel differently about sales. So think on, you know, if it went well, what do we know that will help us in the future? What could have made it even better? So even if we think it went really well, say it was a 9.5 out of 10, is there something that would make it a 10? Because we can take that learning into the future. And that's not about beating ourselves up. That's going, well, this was great. And if I add this on, I'll know it'll make it even greater. And equally, what positive beliefs does it enable? So if you have a belief, I'm going to pick on Andy because he's done such a great job on me on sales, but you know, if you have a belief that you can't do sales, and now you've actually had 2 potential client meetings that went really well, you now can have a belief. If you reflect on that, you can have a belief that actually I can do sales. I can do sales in a way that works for me. But if we never stop and reflect, we just miss that and we carry the old belief that we can't do sales, even though we keep doing it, right? So Andy, you must see this a lot with people you work with.
Yeah, attitude is key. Yeah, I think you're really right, Mandy. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But we just tend not to give enough brain space to the things we do well. We focus all the time on the things we don't do well. And if it didn't go so well, you know, those of you that know me know I can't stand the word should. I think it should just be banned from the English language. It has no purpose in life. It's about what could you do differently next time. It doesn't matter what happened. It's about understanding it, taking it forward. What could you do differently next time? What's a different perspective perhaps you could have? So maybe you're beating yourself up because you dropped the ball on something. But actually, when you've reflected, you've realized that you're busier than you've ever been. You had something go on at home. You had, a client suddenly drop something on you. And actually, you did amazingly well to only drop one ball. Right? So you can, by doing the reflection and the getting curious, you can take a different learning from it. So maybe the learning is, if I start to get that busy, I need to do something, because next time I probably will drop one or two balls. So what can I do? What steps can I take? What can I notice earlier in that process so that I don't drop the ball? What have you learned about yourself and how to react with others? We all have different personality types that don't bring out the best in us, right? So the more you learn about that, the more you reflect on that, then you can develop strategies. And as soon as you start working with a certain type of person, or you see a behavior happening, you're kind of like, right, I'm going to take a breath. I'm going to do a 10-second exercise of looking out the window before I respond to what they've just said, so that I don't regret it. It's just about more self-awareness. And just think about, if it didn't go so well, what could help you be more successful next time? Did you sacrifice your preparation time because you were so busy juggling other things? And actually, that's what you need to make sure that goes in your diary and stays in your diary, for example. So think about, when you're reflecting on your week, what you can learn. And I just want to talk for a moment about empathy, because it's something that comes up all the time when I'm working with people. And I always say to people, do you know what empathy is? And most people do, but I just want to use this definition because I love it. It's the ability to emotionally understand what other people feel, see things from their point of view, and imagine themselves in their place. It's like standing in their shoes. It does not mean that you agree with them. Empathy is not sympathy. You can still think they are completely wrong, but you can understand their perspective. And by understanding their perspective and seeing where they're coming from, it helps you be more successful, because you know how to deal with them much better. So you can, when you're doing your reflecting, and if your reflecting includes an interaction with somebody that didn't go so well, or something that someone else did that really triggered you, practice standing in their shoes as part of your reflection exercise. How did it look and feel to them? What might they be really worried about? And how might the outcome be impacting them? Because when you understand that, it can really help you work out how to approach them the next time, or maybe how to phrase something, or the order in which to do something. Even if this is a client not responding well to a proposal because maybe they've seen something, and we've all done it. Someone sees something and they're off like a freight train down the track, and then you're trying really hard to pull them back, right? So you can maybe understand that that's how they're looking at things. Because I have this conversation with people all the time. We can't change anyone else. We can only change us and how we react to others. So use your learnings, so practice your empathy, think about other people and how they've reacted to things, and take that learning for you so that you can do something different next time. What we can't do is change them. We can't say, oh, well, the next client won't react in that way, because they might. We have no control over that. It's about being ready for how that might happen. So really think about the empathy and how other people are viewing the world, because it really, really helps, because it is so rarely personal, but it can feel personal. But if you practice empathy, it can really help kind of understand, actually, they weren't angry at me, they were worried about this situation and feared that what I was talking about was going to impact this. So I can understand now why they reacted in the way they did. And it really helps. And only when you've done all of that can you really see what the best actions are. So have a look at the reflection that you've done, the answers that I see a lot of you write into the questions, the how to get curious, and think about tops 2 or 3, just one is great, action that you're going to take in the next week. And I say the next week because if you think I'll do it in the next 6 months, I guarantee you it's not going to happen. Right? So next week, what are you going to do differently? And then what's really important is, what are you going to stop doing so that you have time to do that action? For those of you that are busy. Because something will have to stop, even if it's a little less TV or a little less media scrolling or a little less doing things for other people, picking things up after other people that they can do themselves, whatever it is. Think about what you're not going to do so that you've got time for your actions. Think about if you need anyone to help you be accountable. Who are you going to tell? Because if you don't want to tell anyone about these actions, you know, there might be a reason underneath that I'd love to probe with you. How are you going to know if these actions are successful? So when you do your reflection next week, how are you going to know if those actions worked? Because if we don't have a measure of success, then we can just kid ourselves sometimes. And the final thing here is be really honest with yourself about what you're actually going to change. If there's an element of you that's just you, it's part of you, it's how you work, then don't pretend you're going to change it. If you're using, I should change this, I need to change this, I have to change this, probably not going to do it. It's the want word. If you can get to say, I want to change something, then it's much more likely to happen. Okay. So just a very quick thing on the ripple effect. When people start slowing down, becoming more productive, becoming more reflective, it has a positive impact on everyone around them, as well as just yourself. So for some people, this is the motivation to do it. You have lower stress levels. You model the ability to continuously learn from both success and failure. It really helps those around you, particularly those with children, to see that failure isn't a disaster. Failure is just a way to learn. And if you can kind of divorce yourself from the real emotional, personal impact of that, it absolutely will help you be a success later on in life. People around you will feel seen and heard as well, because you'll slow down, there'll be silence, you'll be listening, you'll be responding, not reacting. Has a really big impact on everyone around you. And also, if you are really seeing and hearing those people around you, you'll see new perspectives. If you're practicing empathy, you'll see more things from other people's point of view. Doesn't mean yours is wrong. It just gives you a broader perspective, and you may find a perspective that works for you. So this is true at home as well as in the work areas of your business areas of life, and with friends. You know, I'm sure all of us have some potentially problematic friends relationships at times as well, where we're all so busy with our lives, and sometimes you have those little interactions that aren't as successful as they could be. So think about all the positive ripple effects that you can have as well. And then I've just got a couple more things to share. I talk a lot in some of the work that I do about habits. So when you think about the action that you're going to take next week, the really good actions to take, the ones that have the lasting effects, are the ones that you become habits. So if you're going to take an action to be more reflective, think about how you can make that a habit. Now, there's lots and lots of definitions about what a habit is, but this is the way that I view them. So in our brain, as you all know, we have ways that we can make new neural pathways. We can mold our brain. You know, it's a really important power of humans that we can do this. And I view a habit, if we're having this really nice, clean pathway in our brain, it's easier to walk down this path than it is to try and walk either side of this path. So we will naturally go down this, and we'll probably walk down it without even really thinking. But when we're trying to create a new habit, it's like trying to hack through this undergrowth, right? We're trying to create a new path. And so that's why sometimes, you know, when particularly people do like a health and fitness kick, we go, I'm going to start these 10 things all at once, right? And we're trying to hack 10 pathways through this. And then we fail on one day and we beat ourselves up and we go, what's the point? I'm a failure. And we stop trying, right? So think about which are the paths that you've got that you're really happy with, and which are the paths that you'd rather allow to become a bit more overgrown and create some new ones. And some of you may know about habit stacking, where you link a new habit to an existing habit, and all you're doing there is really having to widen this pathway. So the example I use for that is, I'm sure a lot of us have habits to brush our teeth twice a day. Well, if you want to drink more water and get more new hydration in, just every time you brush your teeth, drink a large glass of water. You've already got the path, and you're just widening it slightly to add a glass of water. So my definition of a habit is it's established when it's easier to do it than not do it. It's easier to walk down this path than not walk down the path. So think about, with the actions that you're going to take, how do you make them a habit? What structures, what support, what reminders, what anything do you need to make it a habit? I love the Strides app. It's a free app, and you get the little dopamine hit of hitting a green tick at the end of the day when you've done what you said you were going to do. It's great. And then once you've got a run going, you never want to stop the run. So be honest with yourself about what you're going to commit to, because the most powerful changes are the ones that we make habits, and they just become our new way of being. And then finally, I think we're pretty much on time, I just want to talk about something called ixon. Have any of you heard of ixon? The Dutch. You gotta love the Dutch. So the Dutch have actually got a name for the art of doing nothing. It's great. It's an actual thing in Holland, ixon time, and it means doing nothing. So Lisa Johnson, you're sitting out looking at the Liver building, that's some ixon time. You're doing nothing. It's not doing nothing if you sat watching the telly or anything like that, but it's literally sitting, doing nothing. Now, just to get boring for a moment, it triggers something called the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like rest and digest. It just allows your body to focus on being a body. It rests it, it does your digestion. It also, remember that default mode network at the beginning, fosters creativity, problem solving. Although you're not actively thinking about the problems, you're just doing nothing, your brain is accessing that mode. And often then when you go back to doing something, you'll look, oh, there's my idea. And it promotes feelings of relaxation, calmness, and cognitive clarity. So the thing with ixon is you can start really small. So maybe, depends on what your other actions are, maybe you'd like to build in a new ixon habit. Maybe we can have, Tracy, some business network ixon time where we just all individually sit and do ixon. You can start with 3 or 5 minutes, and then people that regularly do this, they'll have 30 minutes. They'll regularly have 30 minutes ixon time where you just sit and be. The ultimate break. Okay. So, in summary, mindful breaks into your day, little ones, 10 seconds, 1 minute, improve productivity, reduce stress, and improve self-care. They are not being lazy. If you practice reflecting non-judgmentally on events, you get lots of benefits, and get equally comfortable looking at your successes and your failures, because there's learnings in both of them. Focus on what you could do differently next time, not what you should have done, because there's no benefit in that. It's what you could do differently next time. Decide on a small number of actions and hold yourself accountable. Make it a habit. Think about those pathways, and then maximize the ripple effect. And if you want to try having a different conversation, start all of your next conversations with family, friends, whatever, with what was the best thing about their day. It's brilliant with school kids, this. Instead of going, what did you do today? Oh, I don't know. Ask them what the best thing was about their day. You get a completely different conversation. Okay. So I hope you found that useful. And that's me.
Thank you very much, Mandy.
My pleasure.
Mandy, can I just say you're incredible?
Oh, thank you, Lisa.
Very good.
Incredible. Totally inspired. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Really appreciate that.
So, does